Faith Fulfilled, Mike's Legacy, Chapter 2, Birth of the Braveheart. Ray only stayed in his shelters for a brief time. He didn't want to stay in one place for too long, as to lower the chances of his family, or their minions, finding him. Walking the forests of Minecraft, Ray could hear a struggle somewhere. Naturally, like a fighter, he followed the sounds and he would soon find its source. A girl, all alone, was fighting a horde of zombies and skeletons. Ray took out his white iron blade and jumped in to help her. He thought she'd be the stereotypical damsel in distress, but she was proving that she can hold her own for quite some time. But the amount of enemies in front of her was just far too much. She had bite marks, and arrows all over her, and the fatigue of fighting so many monsters was visible in her staggering steps. Ray was trained by his father on how to deflect incoming arrows with his sword, and so he performed it with elegance. With each swing of his blade, more monsters fell. During a small lull of the fighting, he turns to the girl.
"You all right?"
Ray asked with concern.
Yeah, I am now,"
the girl would say, surprised that anyone was around to help her. With the girl's confidence restored, she got on her feet and drew her chipped iron sword. Ray would draw his diamond sword, dropping the broken iron blade he was wielding before, and together they charged at their enemies. The agonized screams from the monsters and battle cries from two living warriors filled the air. Clangs of iron and diamond swords, the shots from arrows and blood from hard punches surrounded the area. A few elite zombies were present, and Ray battled them all at once, slaying each of them. Backs against one another, they fought like a perfect team. Each one's offensive and defensive strategies complementing the other. It was like two halves of the same whole, fighting as one. The few surviving creatures would flee, giving victory to Ray and his new friend.
"Ooh, what a fight that was,"
the girl would say, letting out a long breath of relief.
"Yeah, it sure was,"
Ray answered. The two put their respective swords into their inventories. Then they took a long look at one another. Silence would follow, as they looked into each other's eyes.
"What is your name?"
Ray would ask, breaking the long silence.
"Amy. My name is Amy Wintry. Thank you for helping me out there,"
she would answer.
"My name is Jones. And, no problem,"
Ray would answer nervously. It was known throughout the world that the Campbells were the legacy holders. Having her know that he was a Campbell could either make her run in fear, or drive her to try and kill him right then and there.
"We fight really well together, don't we?"
Amy would say, a small smile making its way to her lips.
"I was going to say the same thing,"
Ray said, with a matching smile. Although it was not known to them yet, this would be the beginning of a long companionship. They would stick together and survive together. Ray and Amy would fight alongside one another in plenty of other battles. During these battles, it became more apparent to Ray that Amy, while talented with a blade, needed to learn to duel if she was going to survive. Ray would teach Amy the basics in how to duel with a sword. Amy was a bit sloppy at first, but eventually she caught on and became an excellent duelist. She would never surpass her teacher. Over time, the two would develop feelings for each other beyond that of friendship. They kept it to themselves for a while, as they were afraid of rejection. That, and because their own survival was more important than any romance between them, they would do everything for each other. Mining, fighting, hunting, fishing, building, you name it. Their feelings for one another grew with every day. Ray was conflicted about admitting his feelings to her.
"I can't be with her unless she knows who I really am. Being with her while living a lie would just be unbearable,"
Ray thought to himself. Amy had told him before that her family was murdered by the current legacy holder. Ray knew that it must have been either his father or Brian who committed this act. Ray and Amy had known each other for a year and a half now, and now they each lived in a permanent home, their houses right across from each other. The houses were located in an area hidden with a tall forest, so that the legacy holders and their minions would have trouble finding them. The forest had its own decent-sized lake for fishing. This would be their food supply. At the heart of the forest there was a huge ravine, which connected to seemingly endless caves. Iron, coal, redstone, and gold were everywhere. And of course, being a forest, it had no shortage of trees, which satisfied the need for wood. It was rare that they ever needed to leave the forest. Because of this, things began to settle down for the pair. Amy saw the time was right to confess her feelings to Ray. By the end of it all, they were officially a couple. However, Ray couldn't will himself to tell Amy who he really is. Shortly afterward, they'd abandoned their old houses and used many of their resources to build a new house to live in together. This would prove to be a mistake, because shortly after the house's completion, it was assaulted by hordes of monsters on the behalf of Brian. Andrew had found out that Ray had found a partner and was not pleased, because Andrew knew that if Ray were to have any offspring, they would become a threat to him too. So he commanded Brian to send his minions to destroy Ray before he could have the chance to have children. Brian, underestimating the skill his brother possessed, was defeated every time he sent an attack on their house. These constant assaults caused the couple to be on the run once again, building small shelters to live in for short amounts of time before having to move on again. Eventually, Ray did tell Amy of his origins. He told her of his abilities, his father and brother, everything. Ray, expecting to be left alone from that point, waited. But the rejection never came, and Amy never stopped smiling.
I know, Ray. I've known for a while now.
She said with a comforting voice.
But how? How could you possibly?
Pretty sure you lifting the water from the lake with just a lift of your arm is something only a legacy holder is capable of. Plus, why else would all these monsters be just attacking us?
Amy said, giggling.
How come you didn't leave me then? Our family murdered so many innocent people.
Ray asked with confusion.
You're not like them. Not anywhere remotely. If you were like them, you would have killed me the first night we met.
Amy replied. Now, with a clear conscience, their relationship only grew. For years they continued to be hunted, and for years they continued to run. One day, on an unusually peaceful day, with no assaults from monsters, no hurricane force storms, created by Andrew himself in an attempt to wipe them off the planet, unbeknownst to anyone on the planet, the seeds of hope and change were planted. Amy was pregnant. But not with just an ordinary child. This was the child that is destined to destroy the darkness looming in the legacy, redeem the Campbell name, and restore balance to the world. Andrew's worst fear had been realized. A child, given the gifts of the legacy, was born. This child, like Andrew, was born unusually strong with the legacy. Ray felt this child's extreme power almost immediately after his birth. At first, Ray had felt joy and hope for the future, imagining himself training the boy to use his power and visioning a world of peace and order that his son had brought. These happy thoughts were soon to be put to rest, however, as more dark thoughts clouded his mind. The room darkened, but it was just midday. How could this be? Ray found himself in a black void with nothing but a figure in the distance.
What is this? Did I fall asleep?
Ray thought to himself. His natural curiosity drove him to get closer to the unmoving figure. As he got closer, he got a better look at who the figure was.
Notch? No, that's impossible. I must be dreaming.
Before he could say another word, The figure put his hand on Ray's head. Ray began being shown a variety of visions. His son, growing up into a man, turning into a warrior just like his father. But the positivity from these visions stopped there. Ray saw a young warrior, blinded by rage, attacking a scared girl. The same warrior, with the palms of his hands, shooting infernos of fire down into villages and towns below. The vision then turned to this man, kneeling down before... No, it couldn't be. Andrew? Now seeing the same warrior, with dual blades, striking down his own friends and family, this man showing no remorse for any of these horrible deeds. The figure took his hand off Ray's head, and the vision stopped. Ray looked on at the figure.
Notch, what have you shown me?
Ray said with a weak voice. The void began turning back into the room he had previously been in. The figure would slowly fade away as Ray would be brought back to reality. As he caught up with his breath, he began to think long and hard about what he had just seen. Ray looked down at his newly born son, but not with joy as most fathers do, but with fear. Fear of what he could become. Fear of what his child could bring upon the world. He couldn't live with himself, knowing he had created the world's own destruction. Ray would go to Amy with the scenario he had in mind of how much evil and how much destruction their own son could bring onto the world. He proposed that he must never be allowed to realize his powers. Amy reluctantly agreed that for the safety of the world, it had to be done. What started out with such promise would now end with tragedy. Ray would take his own son far away from his home. Ray would find a decent-sized village and decided to leave the boy with them. He instructed them to take care of him and to keep him from harm. Before the villagers could respond, Ray took one final look at his son, then turned and walked away. The child cried out loud, almost as if he knew he was being left behind.